7-win type teams. I can't wait to let 18 to 22-year-olds emotionally ruin me.
I made a call, to Vegas. I said, look, we actually need the favorite here.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome again, Bear Bets Friday edition. Bruce and the Bear here, sitting here in Bloomington, Indiana. Bruce, what's going on, my man?
It's going to be a great weekend. It certainly is in the SEC, Bear. Can't wait to see what we got. Why don't we start with a big one in Baton Rouge? You and I have both seen a lot of big games there. Big pressure for Brian Kelly there, right? I mean, they're sitting there at 5-2, coming off a loss to Vandy. Honestly, Garrett Nussmeier probably had his best game of the season, but they still lost to the Commodores. You got A&M coming in there undefeated. They're only a 2.5-point favorite because it's a night game and it's Tiger Stadium, right? The pressure is on. LSU's banged up. They're going to be without their starting left tackle. They're probably going to be without Whit Weeks, who's their best defensive player. And, Blake Baker's defense has been pretty good. I think there's been times it's looked a little shaky. Now they're going to face Marcel Reed and a really high-powered offense that's playing really well. How do you see this one playing out?
And remember, last year in this game against LSU in the comeback, it was when they made the quarterback change and Reed had the 3 second half rushing touchdowns. So that Brian Kelly and staff have been kind of just waiting for this opportunity to kind of get a little bit of revenge. But it's interesting. I mean, if you look at A&M historically, prior to that win against Notre Dame in South Bend, these were not the types of games that they typically won. They'd lost 13 straight road games against ranked opponents prior to that win in South Bend. I think what we're going to see Saturday night will truly indicate whether A&M has turned the corner or kind of more of the same. But as a handicapper, it kind of feels like it's LSU or pass. I know you mentioned the injuries, but it just seems if you're LSU, if you can win this week, you're sitting there 6-2 going to the bye week before Alabama. Go to Alabama. You can sell yourself on, hey, we have a path to the playoff. If you lose, it's 3 losses. All you're going to be hearing for 2 weeks down there is Brian Kelly's can't coach, fire him. He's done. Who are we hiring? Bring Lane, whatever. Got to Alabama. You got a game against Oklahoma. 7-5, very much on the table. So kind of a last stand per se for the 2025 LSU season.
Yeah, definitely juicy subplot there, no doubt about it. Also in the SEC, you got an Ole Miss team that is coming in reeling a little bit. Their defense got shredded last week by Georgia, and they didn't look very good the week before that against Washington State. They were barely fortunate to survive against an Oklahoma team that's offense has been sputtering since John Mateer got banged up. He came back for Red River, looked a little better last week. The run game with Blaylock has at least now has been more functional. Yeah. They still have a very good defense. They're a 5.5-point favorite. How much confidence do you have in Lane to go in there and pull an upset?
I wish I would know his team's psyche right now. That obviously will determine a long way because they looked so good on offense last week for the first 3 quarters. Georgia couldn't stop them. And then finally in the fourth quarter, whatever adjustments made, Georgia finally got them into 3rd and long situations and 1 second down to get them to 3rd down and finally got them off the field. The Ole Miss offense has been great against everyone. I was talking with someone from the SEC earlier in the week, and they were just talking about how he didn't know it's the stacking of the road games at Georgia last week. Now you're here on the road again against another physical defense. He didn't know if they were going to be able to overcome that. I kind of came away from that conversation with thinking that Oklahoma might be the right side here. But look, moving forward for Ole Miss, if you win this week, I think it's gravy. Then you're really, 11-1 is on the table, 10-2 at worst. If you lose, I still think 10-2 is kind of a worst case scenario if you look at the remainder of the schedule. I mean, the Egg Bowl in Starkville, the end of the year would be their toughest remaining game. I think moving forward. So I still think even if they lose in Norman, they're a college football playoff team. But I get a sense that Ole Miss defense against the physical nature of Mateer and that offensive line and now Blaylock being more involved, they might see a lot of run in an effort to keep Trinidad Chambliss and that offense off the field.
Yeah, I think, as you said, there's a lot of empty calories in that schedule for Ole Miss, but I definitely could see a path 10-2, and you'd be like, okay, we don't know how good this team actually is, but
Yep.
they're not playing the LSU. They're not playing the LSU or Oklahoma schedule. The way the schedule is
No.
broken for them has been very beneficial for Lane Kiffin. But if they get embarrassed in this game, then how do they pick up the pieces from that? That's another. You're talking about the psyche of the team. We'll see.
Right.
The game you're at has gotten more interesting because UCLA has gotten on this roll. It's UCLA going to the gorgeous campus of where you're at in Bloomington, 25.5 point favor for the Hoosiers. They are rolling, but all of a sudden now, Tim Skipper is taken on as the interim head coach. It feels like a little bit of the dark cloud is lifted. Jerry Neuheisel's running the offense. Nico, even he was banged up late in the game last week, but bounced back, helped him get that nice comeback win in the last minutes. And I don't know if the question is, can the Bruins pull another shocker? But it's like, can they keep this interesting? Remember, a year ago, before anybody knew how good Indiana really was, they came out to the Rose Bowl and they probably put a beating on the Bruins worse than anybody did last year. Do you think UCLA can keep this one close?
I think they can, but I can't imagine myself saying that a month ago when they're sitting there uh, 0-4 in the midst of a coaching change prior to that Penn State game. Like, it's clear. I say it's clear, but it's clear to me. Like, something was off there. Something, whether it was Sean or locker room coaching, something was not right because they have looked like a completely different team with Skipper and Jerry Neuheisel now. Nico looks like the quarterback that we all thought he was, and the quarterback that Tennessee thought he was. It's a lot of points. I mean, that's 4 touchdowns, and this is a UCLA offense that I think might have the opportunity to put some points on the board. Maybe it's a 3 or 4 touchdown game late. UCLA can score a late touchdown. Yeah, like you said, I don't think this is another situation where UCLA is a 24-point underdog rather against Penn State and they pull the outright upset. But it would not surprise me at all if they come in here. Remember early last year, Bruce, when we were in State College, and they were people kind of UCLA like, oh my God, how's this game going to be close? UCLA hung around in that game, and it would not be surprising to me at all if the Bruins hang around here for a while on Saturday. It's interesting too when you look at, like, we're talking about Indiana and the playoff. Like, one of the things that we talked about this week on a bunch of shows, and I'd like your opinion on, is like the structure of the playoff, the composition of the playoff. I put out a tweet earlier in the week about, I think ultimately we're headed towards four SEC, 3 Big Ten, 2 ACC, 1 Big 12, Notre Dame group of 5, and people were kind of all up in arms about that. But two things can be true. Like, the Big Ten can have 3 of the best 5 or 6 teams in the country, and the SEC from like 1 to 10 can be a better, deeper league. Like, if you look at like the standings, like I just went on one of the websites and looked at like the ninth, the team that's ninth in the listing in the standings in the SEC is LSU. The team that's ninth in the listings in the Big Ten is UCLA. So it's like two different kind of sports that they're playing right now. Do you see a path like where the Big Ten can get more than 3? Because I don't.
I don't either. I think the only way that maybe that could happen is if Michigan, who looked actually very good last week against Washington after looking really bad out here against USC, but they're really young. So, Bryce Underwood, Marshall, those 2 guys are freshmen. Defense is not as good as it was last year, but their schedule is not that tough. And then at the end of the year, Ohio State has to go to Michigan. Well, we know, ad nauseum what that rivalry has been. If somehow Michigan can beat Ohio State again, then there's your 4th team. I don't think that's going to happen, but I definitely didn't think it was going to happen last year in Columbus. And quite honestly, this Michigan offense is much better than that Michigan offense we saw last year in the shoe. That's the one scenario where I could see it. A plausible scenario. I just think it's harder to look at some of these other teams, whether it's USC or certainly Nebraska got whipped last week at Minnesota. I just don't know who goes on the run there. And you're like, oh yeah, it's somebody in addition to the Buckeyes, Ducks, and Hoosiers. Again, I'm sure there's a scenario where somebody else gets hot, but I just don't see it, again. So, but your point to me is valid. I definitely think the SEC is much, much deeper with good teams. There may not be a great team in the SEC, as there almost always is, but there hasn't been last year, and I don't think there is this year because everybody has significant flaws in the SEC. I don't know if there's a great team anywhere, though. I just feel like there's less. Ohio State played a Texas team that's really young, and they exposed them. It wasn't like they embarrassed them, though.
Right.
I just don't know. I just don't think teams are getting tested the same in the Big Ten. Go back a couple of weeks ago, Bear. There was a lot of people who thought Penn State was better than everybody in the SEC just because they assumed it. And that's not the case, obviously. They're at best a middle of the pack team in the Big Ten, much less, I think they would be less than that, at least in their current state, if they were in the SEC. So I just think it's like one conference is way deeper right now with good teams, and the other conference has teams that we think are really, really good, but we don't really know yet.
You know what they say about assuming, right? Yeah.
I know who they make an ass of. Yes.
Exactly right.
The game that's kind of a little bit off the radar normally, it's an FCS game, but it is an awesome rivalry game. It is North Dakota State, the Bison, against the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State. The coaches have changed. It's not the same guys who were there. John Stickelmeyer is long gone from the sideline with the Jackrabbits. But these two teams have dominated FCS football. What are you looking at here, Bear? Why should we be tuning in if we have a betting interest?
Well, we talk about dominance in the FBS level, and we don't really have it right now. We got two dominant teams in the FCS level. These two teams combined to win 12 of the last 14 FCS titles. You mentioned, obviously, the coaches who were responsible for those are long gone, but number one FCS, number two FCS, probably the first of two meetings. I would be very surprised if these teams did not meet for the FCS title again at the end of the year. It's the Dakota marker game. It should be. I've been very fortunate to have been to this game twice. Once in Fargo Dome, once in Brookings, South Dakota. These fans get after it. It's a hostile, nasty environment. And when South Dakota State finally broke that losing streak, it was a celebratory atmosphere. So, yeah, I think that you can watch this game, I think, Saturday night. It's on television somewhere, and you will be able to watch it. I suggest that you try and make the effort to do so.
All right, Bear, let's get to the walkthrough. Every week we bring in our favorite guest. Sammy P has always got some great stuff. Big one in Nashville this weekend. Vanderbilt, a 2.5-point favorite, hosting Mizzou, two kind of upstart programs in the SEC. The public is believing big on the Commodores, Sammy P. What's the scoop there?
Well, I checked my notes, and it says Vandy's too sexy, basically. Everybody's talking about Vandy. BetMGM put a tweet out Friday morning saying 92% of the bets are on the Commodores. And then I talked to our friend Bear John Murray in Vegas, who said it's all Vandy all day, yet their wisest player in college came in the other day and bet Mizzou plus the 3. It's a battle between the pros and the Joes.
And we know usually how those battles do go and who ultimately winds up winning the battle in the end. It is interesting now that you got 2.5 across the board. It's basically saying, come on, bet Vandy, win by a field goal, you're good. It will be interesting to see how Missouri comes off of the game here, the overtime win against Auburn last week. And historically, since joining the SEC, they're 1-18 again against ranked SEC foes. So it's like, or top 10 SEC foes, I should say. So it's like, do you believe that Vandy is legit top 10 team? You talked to earlier on the week with us, like what the record of Vandy is beaten, or 17-26 or something like that. So we'll find out. I know one thing. I'm not always a guy who lives and dies by these bet splits, but you're telling me John Murray's sharpest college player, bet Missouri. Vandy is a massive public side. There's no way I can lay the 2.5 here with the Commodores.
Bear, you know what? I think all those stats are great, but I think it's BP before Pavia. I think he is such a difference maker in this program. I talked to Barton Simmons this week. He's the general manager there for the Commodores, and he was just talking about like how it's kind of delusional that Pavia could think he was so great and believe it or whatever. And then he goes, after a while, what point does it stop being delusional? Where we're all seeing it, right? And they think they wouldn't trade him for any player in college football, and I could see why they wouldn't. They were 2-10 before Pavia showed up. And now they're a top 10 team. It is amazing. The only comparison I would have for him, it's not another quarterback. It's actually Cam Scatterbu, who was a guy who also was overlooked in the recruiting process. Not a measurables guy, not a guy that people look at and go, oh, yeah, that's going to translate, right? So Scatterbu ends up doing great at Sacramento State at a lower level than Arizona State, which is at the bottom at the time of the Big 12. They sign on for him. And he kind of puts the program on his back. And I feel like his whole attitude and persona kind of got picked up by the whole team. It kind of epitomized that resurgence. So I am big on not just the Commodores this weekend. I think Pavia should win the Heisman if this keeps going.
I was going to say, we talked about him maybe winning the Heisman earlier in the week. And Joel Klatt and I did a little like national championship then draft and went team by team. And when I brought up Vandy and Pavia, Joel had I thought an interesting analogy too. Like he compared him in a sense to Max Duggan from TCU a couple of years back, just kind of that physical mentality, ability to run the ball, maybe not the most polished passer or whatever, but the role that he played, particularly on that TCU offense, I thought that was a pretty good one.
I feel like that's even underselling it. Like Duggan was a bigger recruit. He was a big get for TCU and had an up and down career when he was healthy. Remember, at the start of that national title season, he didn't win the job. Chandler Morris, who's now the quarterback at Virginia, he won the job, and then Morris got hurt, and Duggan played really well. Again, I'm not saying that Pavia is going to lead them to the national title game, but at this point, it wouldn't really shock me, honestly, if he did lead them deep in the playoffs. Yeah. I don't know. Sammy P.
Win a national title. That's what I heard.
I heard
it too. I said crazier things. Honestly, if you had asked me this, I would have feel more proud of that than I would saying Clemson was going to win the national title. So
you should.
Shows you what we all know. Sammy P. Do you think it's crazy?
A little bit. I'll also add this detail. If you would have told me in the middle of August that we would get points with Missouri at Vanderbilt, Bear, I would have said, give me it and give me it all.
Yeah, it is amazing, Bruce. Here we're sitting here in October, almost getting into November, and we're talking about Vandy as a top 10 team, Diego Pavia potentially going to New York as a Heisman candidate, and Vandy maybe making the college football playoff. So it is a little bit crazy. Who else do we have our eyes on maybe making the college football playoff, Bruce?
Well, I know Sammy P, somebody he really does like is Notre Dame. Clark Lee's old school. How are their futures looking, Sammy?
Well, they're 13-1 to win the title, but that's not really the story. The story is how highly are they rated in Las Vegas? And I told Bear during the show on Thursday that I have them number 4 in the country. If you thought that was high, there's a former Vegas bookmaker who says they're number 2 in the country. That's just power rating. So they rate really high, and I think when you run for 300 yards on USC, Bear, that helps your power rating. But he is doubling down. He says they're getting in the playoff, which is now minus 300, by the way. Right. Minus 300. He says they're getting in, and that running game is going to be a problem for somebody in the playoff.
It really is, because you're going to see C.J. Carr continue to improve. He kind of had that freshman moment last week against USC where he didn't make some great decisions, but everybody look around the country. Alabama had that game against Florida State. Miami had that game against Louisville. Teams lose games and have one-off performances. Players have bad games. It ultimately happens, but I think you're right. I think the defense will continue to improve. They're going to be a massive favorite the rest of the way to make the playoff. And I agree. The question is going to be, like, are they able to move up high enough to get a home game in the first round like they did last year? Or are they going to have to go on the road and play Oregon or Georgia or Ole Miss or whomever, or the SEC team? I think that will be determining a long way in how far they go. But we're actually going through a little exercise on Big Noon Kickoff on Saturday about like college football playoff certainty. And then Joel and I, like I said, we did that national championship draft. We kind of steered the discussion, and the genesis of the discussion was in the weekly note that I put together on Sunday. I phrased it like, "How many teams are you picking to win the national championship before you ultimately get to Notre Dame?" And I think our draft, I think they went fifth. So maybe that's a little high, maybe that's a little low, maybe it's about right. But I think Bruce, the Irish are certainly very live to make another deep run.
Yeah, it seems like they're trending in the right direction with what Marcus Freeman has been able to do there, certainly with the run game as it is. A program that feels like it might be trending in the other direction after at least a fast start is the Utah Utes, right? We saw them get kind of whipped at home by Texas Tech. Then last week, very tough game against a good BYU team. Obviously, Bear, you were there with Big Noon. Sammy P, you got some news. It doesn't sound that great about Devon Dampier, the Utes quarterback. What's the latest?
Well, stop me if you've heard this before. We have drama with a Utah quarterback. We would never, huh? After Cam Rising, I thought we were done with all this. I guess not. So Dampier did get hurt in the last game. They brought him back out. They spatted the ankle. They taped it up to the nines. But of course, that's before the swelling and the adrenaline wears off, and that thing can't fit into a shoe anymore. So what we're hearing, game time decision, obviously. They're using the term questionable, which according to conference guidelines says he's 50-50. I'm hearing, though, it's not looking good, and he's trending downward. There, that number is now 13.5. Professionals believe if Dampier is ruled out, again, keyword if, this number could come down to Utah -10.
Well, they're not going to declare he's out for sure. You're not going to hear. You're going to know when they take the field and Ficklin is under center taking the first snap or whatever. It's not. You're not going to know. I agree with you, Sammy. I would operate under the assumption and the handicapping in this game that Ficklin is going to be the guy. I heard he took most of the reps in practice this week. Dampier, I think, practiced for the first time on Friday, or Thursday rather. So we'll see. I think they're better off if they just sit Dampier. We saw how limited he was in that loss against Texas Tech, where he really wasn't able to move around and he had the ankle injury. Just hasn't gotten better. I would operate under the assumption that we're not going to see Dampier, that we're going to see Ficklin. I bet under 50. I don't know if there are any 50s still out there, because I do think we're going to see the Utah defense probably do a good job against Colorado. And again, a lot of Utah doesn't have that game-breaking playmaker on offense anymore. So I agree. If you want to get ahead of the move, I would take Colorado right now.
All right, guys, let's get to the 2-minute drill where we speed through some other key matchups and some things that you guys think are a little bit tasty. Bear, last week, as we mentioned, you saw BYU. BYU is undefeated, 7-0, but they are on the road this week against a Iowa State team, 5-2, albeit without their two standout cornerbacks who are out for the rest of the season. The spread, I think, for a lot of people, including myself, is a little surprising, given that the Cougars are undefeated. What do you make of it?
Yeah, they were in the exact same spot a year ago. They were 7-0. They were an underdog on the road against a UCF team that didn't even have a winning record. And they wound up winning the game going away. So now we've seen this trend the last few years, a team 7-0 on the road, underdog, and they've won the last couple of years. So they've gotten past. So the trend isn't really what you want to like bet. It really isn't actual, but it's just interesting that this BYU team was in this spot last year and they did get the win. I don't know, Sammy. Like, I keep coming back to this. Like, do I want to go back to the well? I had Utah last week with this team, outgained by Utah last week, fourth quarter comeback, fumble luck against Arizona, down double digits with 4.5 minutes to go. Fourth quarter comeback against Colorado. They've just find ways to win. So while it looks like a lot of people are on Iowa State this weekend, you can make a very good case for the Cyclones coming off the Idle week and 2 consecutive losses. I don't know if I'm looking to jump in front of this BYU train again.
They're basically saying on a neutral field, it's basically a coin flip, Bruce, is what they're saying with this line. And I guess that makes sense. I know Bear's got that Iowa State helmet hanging in the man cave too, so I wonder where his bread's buttered.
I have the other game that's kind of surprising to me spread-wise is you have Oregon at home, a 31.5-point favorite, which is obviously a big number, but they are hosting Wisconsin, who has not scored in what seems like a month. The only reason why why I would expect the spread to be not even bigger is maybe the people in Vegas are sitting there going, maybe Dan Lanning's looking across the sidelines and thinking, God, I hope Luke Fickell doesn't turn this into a wrestling match and want to fight me after this, because that's the only reason why he wouldn't be putting up 50 plus in this. Why is the spread not even bigger?
You don't think though Dan Lanning could hold his own with Coach Fickell? You think that would be a
Luke
pretty quick
Fickell
takedown?
is like 170-0. If there was a fight between all the head coaches, and you could put odds on this in college football who are working right now, I think Luke Fickell is picking his teeth with almost every. The only one I could see kind of hanging with him for a while are the two guys who were in the Holy War last week, and one of them is in his 60s, but still probably crazy and tough, and Kyle Whittingham, and the other one is like, it would be like fighting a grizzly bear, and that's Kalani. But beyond that, Coach O ain't a head coach anymore. I think, respect to Dan Lanning, but I don't think he's holding up in that. But I think in this game, it is going to get ugly.
This sounds like a great bracket that we're going to have to draw out, or like draw odds of all the college head coach. I'll tell you what, our guy Mario might get a little dirty in there, a finger in the eye every
you're
now
right.
and then. So
he's got the MMA training background. Yeah.
Exactly. But you're right, though, about this game. You got to go back in the last 30 years. Only 2 teams have been shut out in 3 consecutive games. Baylor in 2000 and then Utah State in 2006. So if the Badgers can score a point and avoid that, all power to them. I think under 7.5, the team total here was like a massive favorite, like minus 240 or something like that. It'll be interesting to see if the Ducks have the opportunity to pitch the shutout, how long Dan Lanning keeps those starters in.
As somebody who bet Rutgers plus 17.5 last week, I'm good going against Oregon personally, Bruce. I'm good. I don't want to live that nightmare again. But wise guys did come into Vegas. Multiple guys at the Wynn, multiple guys at the Westgate told me they did come in and bet Wisconsin plus 34.5. That's how big the number was. And now it's 3 points lower.
Bear, we got a game probably off the radar for most people, but it's certainly not off the radar for you guys. Temple and Tulsa, 2 first-time head coaches, both guys doing a really good job. Casey Keeler did really well at Sam Houston. Now he's back in the Northeast with the Owls. What are you seeing there?
It's a great story. You mentioned with both teams. Tulsa getting that win over Oklahoma State earlier in the year, kind of the final nail in the Mike Gundy era. But Casey Keeler and Temple, you look at the Owls, they haven't won more than 4 games in a season since 2019. They got an opportunity to get win number 5 this week in Casey Keeler's first season for a team that really hasn't been able to find its footing since the whole Manny Diaz is going to be our coach. Oh, Mark Richt retired. I'm going to stay at Miami now, and they called him back and really haven't been able to really get it going. Really good hire in Casey Keeler, and I think he's brought a certain culture and dedication, kind of very similar to, I think, like the blueprint of like Matt Rule and Steve Adazio and Jeff Collins and those guys, but when they had Temple in contention in the American and in the bowl game every year.
Last one for you guys. Sunflower, Kansas State, Kansas. I mean, are the Wildcats about ready to get it rolling after a really sluggish start and a bad, you lose 4 of your first 5 or 6 games? Now, have they turned it?
Well, we talked about going into some of those games early in the season that there were a lot of coin flip type results here. Like they were not as bad as their record indicated, but it's truly amazing now. You've got Kansas State, which has won 16 straight meetings in the Sunflower State Showdown against KU. Mark Mangino was the last coach to beat K-State. They've lost the last 2 years by 2 points and 4 points. Is this finally the year? They're favored again this year, and it kind of leads you to like the if not now, Sammy, then when can Lance Leipold finally end this long losing streak to the Purple Cats?
I think you can. They're clearly favored. Granted, very small number, 3.5. I just don't know how we're going to get a lot of stops in this game. The total's 55.5, 56. I think we get a lot of touchdowns, Bruce. I think we do.
As a viewer, that's a good thing. That means Jalen Daniels and Avery Johnson are kind of going off, and that could be an entertaining game, especially if you don't have a dog in the fight
should be
or money on it.
Should be a very It should be a very entertaining game. And the Big 12 provides a lot of entertaining games, one of the more wide open conference races that we have right now. Texas Tech favored, but a lot of contenders there in that league. We'll see how it plays out. As always, we appreciate Sammy for hopping on. Bruce, every week. We can't wait to get to it next Friday. Everyone knows the schedule by now. Monday, Weekend Rewind. Thursday, NFL. Thursday, College. Friday, Bruce and the Bear. On FS1 throughout the week. Sammy, Bruce, have a great weekend. Unless you bet or you lose when you win.